You are listening to HOA Karen Patrol. This is the pettiest snow emergency ever. I am standing in my driveway in Redmond, Washington, staring at a woman who is holding a clipboard like it is a weapon. Snow is falling sideways, the kind that stings your face and recovers every path you just cleared. She is yelling at me about my snow pile, the one I spent 2 hours building last night after the plow buried my truck. Her name is Colleen Thompson, and she runs the finance committee for Hidden Creek Ice Belt HOA. She is also the reason I cannot leave for work without a confrontation. You are refusing compliance, and I am escalating to a hearing. That is the third time she has said hearing in the last 5 minutes. I am a small business owner. I run a landscaping company, and I have a furnace maintenance appointment in 40 minutes. The technician will not come back for weeks if I miss this slot. But Colleen does not care about that. She cares about the fact that my snow pile, which is maybe 4 feet tall and sitting at the edge of my property line, is allegedly creating a blind spot for drivers. She has a tape measure in her other hand, and she keeps waving it at me like she is about to cite some obscure subsection of the covenant. I tell her the pile is on my lot. I tell her I cleared the sidewalk. I tell her the plow dumped half a ton of slush against my truck, and I had to move it somewhere. She does not listen. She just taps her pen against the clipboard and says she is documenting everything. Then she tells me she is fining me $300 for non-compliance with emergency winter safety protocols, and if I do not move the pile by noon, she will authorize a tow. I ask her what she means by tow. She says if the pile obstructs traffic flow or creates a safety hazard, the HOA can authorize removal of the obstruction and any vehicle contributing to the issue. I point out that my truck is parked legally in my own driveway. She says the pile is the obstruction and the truck is part of the problem because I used it to push the snow. That is not even true. I used a shovel. But she does not care about facts. She cares about enforcement. She pulls out her radio and calls someone. I hear a voice crackle back. She says she needs a plow vendor on standby and possibly a tow authorization for a non-compliant vehicle. I feel my chest tighten. I have a custody arrangement with my ex, and I cannot risk missing pickup times because of HOA hearings and delays. If I get stuck in a dispute that drags out, it messes up my whole week. That is the stakes here. Colleen knows it, and she uses it. I ask her to show me the rule. She flips through her binder and reads off a section about winter maintenance and resident responsibility. It says residents must clear snow in a manner that does not create hazards for other residents or impede emergency access. I tell her my pile does not impede anything. She says that is not for me to decide. She says the board has discretion to determine what constitutes a hazard, and she is the finance lead, so she gets to make the call. Then she says the line that I will hear again later. We can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works. She says it with this smug little smile, like she just quoted the Bible. I do not argue. I just stand there and let her talk. Because that is exactly what I need her to do. I have been recording on my phone since she started yelling. The doorbell camera is running too. Every word she says is going into a file I am building, and she has no idea. She finishes her speech and tells me I have until noon to move the pile, or she will issue the tow authorization. Then she turns and walks back toward her house, radio in hand, boots crunching through the snow. I watch her go. I check my watch. I have 30 minutes to get to the furnace appointment. I get in my truck and drive. The furnace guy shows up on time, which is a miracle. He spends 20 minutes checking the system and tells me the filter is shot and the blower motor is making a noise. He says he can order the part, but it will take a week. I tell him to do it. He leaves. I check my phone. There is an email from the HOA management company. The subject line says, "Violation notice. Immediate action required." I open it. It is a formal notice citing the same pile issue, plus a new one. Apparently, my grill cover, which has snow on it, is now considered unsightly storage. The email says, I am in violation of aesthetic standards, and I need to remove or cover the grill within 24 hours, or face additional fines. I sit down at my kitchen table and read the whole thing. The notice is signed by Colleen, acting on behalf of the board. It references emergency powers granted during winter weather events. It says the board has the authority to issue immediate fines without a hearing if the violation poses a safety risk. I look up the rule. It does not say that. The rule says the board can expedite hearings, but it does not say they can skip them. Colleen is making this up as she goes. I call the management company. I get a receptionist who transfers me to a local rep. The rep says she is aware of the situation and the board has authorized enforcement. I ask her if she read the rule. She says the board interprets the rules, not her. I ask her if she knows that Colleen is threatening to tow my truck over a snow pile. She says she cannot comment on specific enforcement actions. I ask her if she knows that I have not missed a single HOA payment and I have receipts to prove it. She pauses. I can hear her typing. She says the account shows a late payment from November. I tell her that is not true. She says the ledger shows it. I tell her I have a bank confirmation. She says I need to submit it to the board for review. If you are loving this chaos, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another wild HOA revenge story. I hang up and open my bank app. I pull up the November payment. It cleared on the 3rd of the month. The HOA due date is the 1st, but the grace period is 10 days. I was early. I screenshot the confirmation and email it to the management company with a subject line that says payment proof. Please correct ledger. Then I open the covenant and start reading. The snow rule is buried in Section 12, subsection 4. It says residents must clear sidewalks within 24 hours of snowfall and must not create hazards. It does not define hazard. It does not mention piles. It does not say anything about towing. I take a picture of the page. Then I flip to the enforcement section. It says fines require a hearing unless the violation is ongoing and poses immediate danger. It also says residents have the right to appeal any fine within 10 days. Colleen is skipping all of that. I look at the clock. It is past noon. I go outside. My snow pile is still there. No tow truck. No plow. Just Colleen standing at the end of my driveway with her radio and a notepad with wet pages. She is taking pictures. I walk over. She tells me I am in violation and the tow is authorized. I ask her where the tow truck is. She says it is on the way. I ask her if she has a signed authorization. She says she does not need one. I tell her that is not what the covenant says. She tells me I am not a lawyer and I need to stop interfering with enforcement. I go back inside. I pull up the doorbell footage from this morning. I clip the section where Colleen says we can tow first and explain later. I save it. Then I call my attorney. I do not have an HOA lawyer, but I have a guy who helped me with a business contract last year. He tells me to document everything, do not pay any disputed fees, and request a hearing in writing. He says if they tow the truck, call the police and report it as an unauthorized tow. He also says to check the covenant for meeting notice requirements. If they are scheduling hearings at impossible times, so I no-show, and they default vote, that is a breach. I thank him and hang up. Then I email the management company again. I request a formal hearing for the snow pile fine and the grill cover fine. I ask for at least 7 days' notice and a time that is not during work hours. I attach the bank confirmation again. I hit send. 2 hours later, I get a reply. The hearing is scheduled for Friday at 10 in the morning. That is 3 days from now. The email says failure to appear will result in a default judgment and immediate collection action. I look at my calendar. Friday at 10 is the middle of my workday. I have 3 landscape consultations scheduled. I email back and ask for an evening slot. The reply comes in 10 minutes. Evening slots are reserved for board meetings. Violation hearings are conducted during business hours to ensure board availability. That is not in the covenant. That is Colleen making up another rule. I call the attorney again. He says to show up if I can, but if I cannot, send a written statement and demand they reschedule. He also says to file a complaint with the management company regional office if the local rep is not helping. I ask him how I find the regional office. He says check the management contract or the covenant. I dig through my files. The covenant lists the management company name, but no regional contact. I Google the company. I find a corporate office number. I call. I get voicemail. I leave a message explaining the situation and asking for a callback. Wednesday morning, I get an email. It is not from the management company. It is from Colleen. The subject line says, Community Safety Alert. I open it. It is a blast email to the entire neighborhood. It says one resident is refusing to comply with winter safety rules and is creating hazards that could result in accidents or injuries. It does not name me, but it describes my house by street and lot number. It says the board is taking swift action to protect the community and residents should report any similar violations immediately. I feel my face get hot. I forward the email to my attorney. He replies in 5 minutes. He says that is defamation if it is false, and it is definitely harassment. He says to save everything and consider filing a formal complaint. He also says to check if the HOA has insurance, because if this goes to court, the insurance company will want to know. I check the covenant again. There is a section on insurance. The HOA is required to carry liability coverage. I make a note. Then I go outside to check the pile. It is still there. No tow truck. No plow. Just fresh snow on top of the old snow. The drifting snow is recovering the cleared paths. I grab my shovel and clear the sidewalk again. Colleen is watching from her window. I can see someone peeking through frosted blinds. I wave. She does not wave back. Thursday morning, I get another email. This one is from the management company. It says the board has reviewed my payment records and determined that the November payment was received late. It says the late fee stands and I owe an additional $25. It also says failure to pay within 10 days will result in the matter being sent to collections. I look at the date. The payment cleared on November 3rd. The due date is November 1st. The grace period is 10 days, which means the payment is not late until November 11th. I cleared it on the 3rd. This is not a mistake. This is fraud. I screenshot the bank confirmation again. I also pull up the covenant section on payment deadlines. I highlight the grace period clause. Then I write a reply. I attach both screenshots. I write that the payment was not late, the ledger is incorrect, and I am disputing the late fee. I also write that threatening collections on a disputed charge is a violation of fair debt practices. I hit send. Then I call the regional office again. This time someone picks up. I explain the situation. The woman on the phone says she will look into it and call me back. I give her my number. She says it might take a few days. I tell her I have a hearing tomorrow, and I need this resolved before then. She says she will do her best. Friday morning, I wake up to another email. This one says, the hearing is still on, and I am expected to appear. It also says, the board has additional violations to discuss, including failure to maintain my property in accordance with aesthetic standards. I look outside. My grill cover is still there. It has snow on it. That is the violation. I get in my truck and drive to the HOA management office. It is a small building near a strip mall. I walk in. The receptionist asks if I have an appointment. I say I am here for the 10 o'clock hearing. She checks her computer and tells me to wait. I sit down. Colleen walks in 5 minutes later. She does not look at me. She goes straight to the back. A few minutes later, the receptionist tells me to go to conference room B. I walk in. There are 3 board members sitting at a table. Colleen is one of them. The other 2 are a man in his 60s and a woman in her 50s. Colleen is holding a binder. The man is holding a laptop. The woman is holding a notepad. I sit down. The man says they are here to discuss multiple violations and determine appropriate fines. He says I have 10 minutes to present my case. I pull out my phone. I open the bank app. I show him the November payment confirmation. I explain the grace period. I show him the covenant section. He nods. He does not say anything. Colleen says the ledger shows the payment was late, and the board stands by the late fee. I move on. I pull up the snow pile rule. I read it out loud. I point out that it does not mention piles, and it does not authorize towing. Colleen interrupts. She says the board interprets the rules and the pile creates a hazard. I ask her to define hazard. She says it obstructs visibility. I ask her to show me the obstruction. She says she has photos. She pulls out her phone and swipes through pictures. The pictures show my snow pile. They also show clear sight lines in every direction. There is no obstruction. I point this out. The man looks at the pictures. He looks at Colleen. He asks her where the blind spot is. She points at the pile and says drivers cannot see around it. I ask her which drivers. She says anyone turning onto my street. I pull up a map on my phone. I show him that my house is mid-block, not on a corner. There is no turn. There are no drivers who need to see around my pile. The man frowns. Colleen says the pile is still unsightly, and it violates the aesthetic standards. I point out that aesthetic standards are subjective, and the covenant requires a written complaint from another resident before the board can act. She says the board received multiple complaints. I ask her to show me the complaints. She says they are confidential. I let that sit for a second. Then I move to the grill cover. I explain that the cover has snow on it because it snowed. I ask if every resident with snow on their patio furniture is in violation. The woman at the table says the issue is that the grill is visible from the street. I point out that half the neighborhood has grills visible from the street. She says those residents are not in violation because they do not have covers. I ask her to explain how a cover is worse than no cover. She does not have an answer. I pull up the email blast. I read it out loud. I point out that it describes my property and accuses me of creating hazards without proof. I say that is defamation. Colleen says the email is a community safety alert, and it is within the board's rights to inform residents of ongoing issues. I ask her if she checked the accuracy of the claims before sending the email. She says the claims are accurate. I ask her to prove it. She says the photos prove it. I point out that the photos show no obstruction. The man closes his laptop. He says the board will deliberate and notify me of the decision within 5 business days. I stand up. I thank them for their time. I walk out. Colleen follows me into the hallway. She says I am making this harder than it needs to be. She says if I just comply, the fines will go away. I tell her I am not paying fines for violations that do not exist. She says the board has the authority to enforce the rules as they see fit. I tell her the board does not have the authority to make up rules. She says I should read the covenant more carefully. Then she says something I will remember. She says I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized, and if people like me do not follow the rules, the whole system falls apart. That is her catchphrase. She says it like she is a hero. I leave. I drive home. I check my voicemail. There is a message from the regional office. The woman says she reviewed the account and the November payment was received on time. She says the ledger was incorrect and the late fee will be removed. She also says she is escalating the issue to her supervisor because the local rep did not follow protocol. I save the message. That afternoon, I get another email from Colleen. It says the board has made a decision. The snow pile fine is upheld at $300. The grill cover fine is upheld at $100. The late fee is upheld at $25. Total due is $425. Payment is due within 10 days or the matter will be sent to collections. I forward the email to my attorney and to the regional office woman. Saturday morning, I wake up to the sound of a truck. I look outside. There is a tow truck in my driveway. A guy is hooking up my truck. I run outside. I ask him what he is doing. He says he has an authorization from the HOA. I ask him to show me the authorization. He pulls out a magnetic tow authorization placard and holds it up. It has the HOA name on it, but no signature. I ask him who called him. He says, Colleen. I tell him the authorization is not valid. He says he is just doing his job. I tell him if he tows my truck, I will call the police and report it as theft. He pauses. He looks at the placard. He looks at me. He says he will call his boss. He makes the call. I hear him explain the situation. I hear the boss say something. The driver hangs up. He tells me his boss says he cannot tow without a signed authorization. I thank him. He unhooks my truck and drives away. Colleen is standing at the end of my driveway. She is furious. She yells at the driver as he leaves. Then she turns to me. She says I am obstructing enforcement, and she is escalating this to the full board. I tell her to do whatever she wants. She storms off. I go inside and call the police non-emergency line. I explain the situation. The dispatcher says, if the tow happens again, call back and an officer will respond. I thank her and hang up. Then I email the regional office woman again. I attach a photo of the tow truck and explain what just happened. I also attach the doorbell footage of Colleen yelling at the driver. She replies within an hour. She says this is unacceptable and she is scheduling a meeting with the board and the local rep for Monday. Sunday is quiet. No emails. No tow trucks. No Colleen. I spend the day catching up on work and clearing the driveway again. The drifting snow is relentless. Every time I clear a path, it fills back in within hours. Monday morning, I get a call from the regional office woman. She says she met with the board and reviewed the enforcement actions. She says the snow pile fine is being rescinded because the rule does not support the violation. The grill cover fine is being rescinded because there is no documented complaint. The late fee is being rescinded because the payment was not late. She also says the email blast was inappropriate and the board is issuing a formal apology. I ask her what happens to Colleen. She says Colleen will remain on the board, but she will no longer have enforcement authority. I thank her. She says she will send written confirmation by the end of the day. I hang up. I feel relief for about 10 seconds. Then I get another email. This one is from Colleen. It says the board decision is under appeal and I should not consider the matter closed. It says the board has the right to review any decision made by the management company and the final authority rests with the board. I forward the email to the regional office woman. She calls me back immediately. She says the board does not have the authority to appeal a management company decision. She says the covenant gives the management company final authority on disputes unless the board votes to replace them. She says Colleen is acting on her own and the email is not valid. Then she tells me something I did not expect. She says the board is scheduling an emergency meeting for Tuesday night to discuss Colleen's conduct. She says if I want to attend, I am welcome. I say I will be there. Tuesday evening, I drive to the community center. The meeting is in the main room. There are about 20 residents in the audience. Colleen is sitting at the board table with the same man and woman from the hearing. The regional office woman is standing at the front. She starts the meeting by explaining the issues with the enforcement actions. She goes through each violation and explains why it was rescinded. Then she pulls up the email blast. She reads it out loud. She says the email violated the covenant because it named a specific property without proof of violation, and it damaged my reputation. She says the board is required to follow due process, and the email bypassed all of that. Colleen interrupts. She says the email was necessary to protect the community. She says I was creating a hazard and someone needed to act. The regional office woman asks her to define the hazard. Colleen says the snow pile obstructed visibility. The woman asks her to show proof. Colleen pulls out her phone and swipes through the same photos from the hearing. The woman projects them on the screen. She points out that the photos show no obstruction. Colleen says the obstruction is obvious to anyone with common sense. The woman asks her if she measured the sightlines. Colleen says she did not need to measure because it was obvious. The woman says that is not how enforcement works. Then the woman pulls up the covenant. She reads the snow rule out loud. She asks Colleen to show her where it mentions piles. Colleen flips through her binder. She lands on a page. She reads it out loud. It is the wrong section. It is about landscaping. The audience laughs. Colleen turns red. She flips to another page. She reads again. It is the aesthetic standards section. It does not mention snow. The woman waits. Colleen keeps flipping. Finally, she says the rule is implied. The woman says, Rules are not implied. She says the board cannot enforce a rule that does not exist. The man at the table speaks up. He says the board has discretion to interpret the rules in the interest of safety. The woman says discretion is not the same as authority. She says the board can interpret ambiguous language, but it cannot invent new rules. She says the snow rule is clear, and it does not support the enforcement action. The man says the board disagrees. The woman says the board does not have the authority to disagree with the covenant. She says if the board wants to change the rule, it needs to amend the covenant through a vote. The man says that will take months. The woman says that is how the process works. Colleen stands up. She says the board is doing its job, and I am the one refusing to comply. She says I am wasting everyone's time with appeals and complaints. She says if I do not like the rules, I should move. The woman says that is not helpful. Colleen says she is the reason this neighborhood stays civilized, and the board should back her up. The audience is quiet. The woman says the board is not here to back anyone up. She says the board is here to follow the covenant and protect the residents. She says Colleen's actions violated both of those responsibilities. Then I stand up. I pull out my phone. I open the doorbell footage. I ask the woman if I can show something. She nods. I connect my phone to the projector. I play the clip. It is the morning confrontation. Colleen is yelling at me about the snow pile. She says we can tow first and explain later. The audience gasps. The woman pauses the video. She asks Colleen if she said that. Colleen says it was taken out of context. The woman says the context is clear. She says Colleen threatened an unauthorized tow, and that is illegal. Then I play the rest of the clip. Colleen is measuring the snow pile. She is calling the plow vendor. She is telling me I will be fined and towed. She is saying the board has emergency authority. The woman stops the video. She says Colleen cited emergency authority that does not exist. She says the covenant requires a hearing before fines can be issued unless the violation is ongoing and poses immediate danger. She asks Colleen if she held a hearing. Colleen says she did not have time. The woman says that is not an excuse. She says Colleen violated due process and opened the HOA to liability. Then I pull out the bank confirmation. I hand it to the woman. I explain that the management company marked my November payment late, even though it cleared on time. I explain that Colleen upheld the late fee at the hearing, even after I showed proof. The woman looks at the confirmation. She looks at Colleen. She asks Colleen if she reviewed the payment records before the hearing. Colleen says the ledger showed the payment was late. The woman says the ledger was wrong, and Colleen should have verified it. Colleen says that is the management company's job. The woman says it is the board's job to ensure accuracy before issuing fines. Then the woman says she has one more thing to address. She pulls up an insurance report. She says the HOA's liability carrier was notified of the enforcement actions and the email blast. She says the carrier issued a risk warning. She says if the HOA continues to enforce rules without due process, the carrier will cancel the policy. She says without insurance, the HOA cannot operate. The board members go pale. The man asks if the carrier is serious. The woman says the carrier is very serious. She says the HOA has 60 days to implement a compliance review process and train the board on proper enforcement procedures. She says if the HOA fails to comply, the carrier will drop coverage and the HOA will be uninsurable. Colleen says that is not fair. The woman says it is entirely fair. She says the board created the risk and the carrier is protecting itself. She says the email blast alone is enough to justify cancellation because it exposed the HOA to a defamation claim. Colleen says, I would never sue. The woman says that is not the point. She says the carrier does not care whether I sue. The carrier cares that the HOA violated its own rules and created liability. She says the board needs to take this seriously, or the HOA will collapse. The man asks what happens next. The woman says the board needs to vote on whether to keep the current management company or hire a new one. She says the current company is willing to stay if the board agrees to follow the compliance process. She says if the board refuses, the company will terminate the contract and the board will need to find a replacement. She says replacements are hard to find in the middle of winter, and the process could take months. She says during that time, the HOA will not be able to enforce any rules or collect any fees. The board members look at each other. The man says they need to discuss this in executive session. The woman says that is fine, but the vote needs to happen tonight. She says the carrier wants an answer by the end of the week. The man nods. The board goes into executive session. The audience waits. Colleen is sitting at the table with her arms crossed. She does not look at me. I sit down and wait. 30 minutes later, the board comes back. The man says the board has voted to keep the current management company and implement the compliance process. He says the board is also voting to remove Colleen from the finance committee and reassign her to a non-enforcement role. Colleen stands up. She says the board cannot do that. The man says the board just did. He says Colleen's actions violated the covenant and put the HOA at risk. He says the board has a fiduciary duty to protect the association, and removing her is necessary. Colleen says she is resigning from the board effective immediately. The man says that is her choice. Colleen grabs her binder and walks out. The woman from the regional office stands up. She says the enforcement actions against me are officially rescinded. She says the HOA is removing the enforcement action and voiding the ledger entry. She says I will receive written confirmation within 3 business days. She also says Karen's complaint is ruled unfounded with evidence cited. She says the HOA is issuing a formal apology for the email blast and the improper enforcement actions. She says if I have any further issues, I should contact her directly. I thank her. The meeting ends. I walk to my truck. The snow is falling again. I check my phone. There is an email from the management company. It says the fines have been removed and my account is clear. It also says the board is implementing new enforcement procedures and all future violations will require a hearing before fines are issued. I reply and thank them. Then I drive home. The next morning, I wake up to another email. This one is from the board. It says the board is hiring an interim manager to oversee enforcement while the compliance process is implemented. It says the interim manager will freeze all winter enforcement until an audit finishes. It says the audit will review all recent enforcement actions and correct any errors. It says residents who were fined improperly will receive refunds. I save the email. 2 weeks later, I get a check in the mail. It is a refund for the fines I paid last year. I deposit it. Then I get another email. This one is from the tow truck driver. He says he wanted to let me know that the HOA kept calling him for sketchy jobs, and he stopped taking their calls. He says Colleen tried to get him to tow cars without proper authorization, and he reported her to his company. He says his company blacklisted the HOA, and they will not respond to any future calls. I reply and thank him. Spring comes. The snow melts. The drifting snow stops recovering the cleared paths. The neighborhood is quiet. Colleen moved out in March. I heard she bought a condo in a different development. The board hired a permanent manager who follows the rules and does not make up new ones. The compliance process is working. The insurance carrier renewed the policy. The HOA is stable. I still have the doorbell footage. I still have the bank confirmations. I still have the emails. I keep them in a folder on my computer, just in case. Because in a place where normal life becomes an enforcement opportunity, you never know when you will need proof. Keep your cool, and I will see you next time.